Hello and welcome back to Football Daily, where today we're bringing you 10 managers who completely lost their authority. Let's go. 10. Arsene Wenger. We begin with the end of one of European football's last great dynasties, Arsene's Arsenal. The Frenchman's reign in North London saw the Gunners shaken up and catapulted into the 21st century in his exciting singular vision, with everything from the style of play to players' diets to transfers being dictated by the man in the dugout. And Wenger's dictatorial rule over the club's footballing outlook wielded great results. 3 Premier League titles and 3 FA Cups in his first 8 seasons to be exact. And his influence on the institution was so big that when they applied for a loan to build the Emirates Stadium, the banks demanded Wenger sign a 5-year deal with the club. But come 2017 and a lot had changed. As we know, the second half of Wenger's tenure came nowhere near to matching the first, and pressure for improved on-field performance eventually saw Chief Executive Ivan Gazidis consider a backroom restructure. This didn't go down well with Arsene, who claimed, "I don't know what director of football means," but unfortunately for him, they were the words of a man losing his grip on the club. That November, Sven Mislintat was hired as the club's chief scout, and Raul Sanllehi he brought in as head of football relations. The following April, Wenger announced he was leaving the club after 22 years, although it has since become clear he didn't have much say in the matter. 9. Unai Emery. Wenger's successor at the Emirates, Unai Emery was no doubt relieved to find the Gunners had no Brazilian players called Neymar among their ranks. He was hired by PSG in 2016 on the evidence of his trophy-laden spell with Sevilla, with whom he won 3 consecutive Europa Leagues in just 3.5 seasons. Emery's first season at the Parc des Princes was tough enough. The club succumbed to a second-place finish for the first time in 5 years, pipped to the title by a Kylian Mbappe-inspired Monaco, and let a 4-goal lead slip to exit the Champions League in the last 16 to a Neymar-inspired Barcelona. The club subsequently signed both superstars that summer, with the Brazilian arriving for an eye-watering world record fee. The following campaign saw Emery win a domestic treble, losing just 6 games in all competitions, but it was also dominated by reports of spats between Neymar and Edinson Cavani, and rumours linking the Brazilian with a move to Real Madrid. On leaving the club in 2018, Emery confirmed there had been a power shift within the PSG dressing room, saying, "I know when I'm the main person and when I'm not. At Manchester City, the leader is Pep. At PSG, the leader is called Neymar." But do you want to hear more about how Unai Emery is getting on in his current job? Subscribe to Football Daily if you haven't already, and join the discussion on Sunday Vibes. 8. Frank Rijkaard. If there's one man who knows about player power all too well, it's Frank Rijkaard, because he exercised it very well himself. Perhaps the only player to have had the audacity to undermine Johan Cruyff, he did just that whilst playing under him at Ajax, walking out of the team after allegedly telling the Dutch football mastermind, "F*** you and your eternal whining." So it's pretty amazing that a few years down the line, Cruyff put the episode behind him by recommending Rijkaard for both the Netherlands and Barcelona jobs, both of which were given to the Dutchman. And at Barca, Cruyff's judgment paid off, with his former player revitalising the club, overseeing the peak of Ronaldinho, Samuel Eto'o and Carlos Puyol's careers, bringing Lionel Messi into the side and winning the club just their second Champions League at the time. But come 2007-08 and the ship was sinking rapidly. The Blaugrana succumbed to a 3rd-place finish in La Liga, 18 points off champions Real Madrid, while Rijkaard lost control of key players. Ronaldinho had prioritised partying in Castelldefels over training and made just 20 starts all season, while Eto'o clearly didn't trust a manager who had accused him of refusing to play just a year earlier. It was never going to end well, and the writing was on the wall when his star-studded side was torn apart by Pep Guardiola's Barcelona B team in a training match. That May, Barca had to suffer the humiliation of giving their arch-rivals a guard of honour at the Bernabeu, and just a day later, club president Joan Laporta announced Rijkaard would be replaced by Pep. The Dutchman never managed at the pinnacle of the game again, and now makes his living as a property developer. 7. Carlo Ancelotti. A teammate of Rijkaard's at AC Milan during the late 80s and early 90s, Carlo Ancelotti has enjoyed a fair amount more success in the dugout. However, when it came to his time at Bayern Munich, it's probably fair to say he never held much power. Coming in to replace the Man City-bound Pep Guardiola, Ancelotti's prime objective was to guide the club to a 6th Champions League, the one prize which had evaded his Catalan predecessor. But after failing to fulfil that ambition in his first season at the Allianz, things quickly fell apart for the Italian coach. Key players grew tired of his allegedly lax training methods, with the likes of Robben, Ribéry and Hummels organising secret high-intensity sessions behind his back. Amazingly for a coach who had earned a reputation for world-class man management during his time at Milan, Chelsea and Real Madrid, by the time Ancelotti lost his job in Bavaria, 5 players wanted him out, including Thomas Müller, Robert Lewandowski and the aforementioned Robin. And he was clearly not looked upon favourably by those working above him either. After his final game in charge, a 3-0 loss to PSG, Chief Executive Karl-Heinz Rummenigge told the media, "What we saw this evening was not Bayern Munich." 6. Roy Hodgson. Now the oldest man to have ever managed in the Premier League at 71, when Roy Hodgson took the Blackburn job in 1997, he arrived at Ewood Park as a relatively young exotic prospect. Hodgson had managed almost exclusively abroad, save for 2.5 seasons at Bristol City in the early 80s, and was credited with transforming the domestic game in Sweden by introducing zonal marking. He came to the Prem boasting 7 Swedish top-flight titles, with spells as manager of the Swiss national team and Inter Milan also on his CV. So naturally, Rovers fans expected a lot from the appointment, just 2 years after winning the league. And in his first season, Hodgson took them as high as 2nd before finishing in an adequate 6th. However, his second term swiftly saw him lose his authority, after captain Tim Sherwood was refused a move to Tottenham. The midfielder's dissatisfaction quickly fed into his teammates, who were also struggling with Hodgson's meticulous training routines. He oversaw a car crash start to the season, with Blackburn picking up just 2 wins from 14 games, and he was given the sack with the club sitting at the bottom of the table. And it couldn't have come at a worse time for Hodgson either. Just 2 months earlier, he had been offered the Germany job. The episode also muddied his reputation in England so much that he didn't land another Premier League gig for nearly 10 years, despite his high regard on the continent. 5. Ruud Gullit. Meet anyone from Newcastle, and whether they're a football fan or not, the first thing they will tell you is that Alan Shearer is God. So you'd probably think that having a public falling out with the former Magpies talisman would not be a good way to go about asserting your authority at St James's Park. But that's exactly what Ruud Gullit attempted to do when he was Newcastle manager in the late 90s. Taking the job in 1998, the Dutchman led the Tyneside club to an FA Cup final in his first season, but disagreements with club captain Rob Lee brought toxicity to his reign at the club, with Gullit even taking away Lee's squad number and giving it to new signing Kieran Dyer. Unsurprisingly, this power move didn't go down well with Shearer, and the episode saw a number of key players grow tired of Gullit's management. The final nail in the coffin came when he dropped Shearer for a crucial league meeting with arch-rival Sunderland. Newcastle lost the game, and Gullit left the club soon after. The moral of this story: don't mess with God. 4. André Villas-Boas. It feels like an age since André Villas-Boas was in the Stamford Bridge dugout, and the fact he's still just 41 illustrates just how young he was when he took the Chelsea job. Stepping into a team created by Mourinho and nurtured by the likes of Ancelotti, Villas-Boas' astronomical achievements in just 1 year at Porto had been enough to convince Roman Abramovich to pay the €15 million compensation required to land his man in 2011. However, his lack of managerial experience became a fatal stumbling block in the dressing room. The Portuguese coach tried to instill a whole new style of play on a side which had won 8 trophies since Abramovich's takeover, and when it didn't work out, he quickly saw his authority vanish. And perhaps it wasn't so surprising, with the likes of Frank Lampard and Didier Drogba only months younger than him, winning over such a long-established stronghold of talent was always going to be an uphill task. Such was AVB's lack of power that reports began to emerge of Drogba taking half-time team talks himself, and the players conspiring to switch back to more Mourinho-esque game plans. He was sacked in March 2012, with the club having won just 1 of their previous 8 matches, and having no leader to turn to in the dugout. 3. John Barnes. If you were expecting to see the Sarri Kepa incident talked about here, go and check out this week's XI. However, John Barnes had to deal with an even more humiliating episode during his ill-fated spell as Celtic manager. In truth, it was clearly unwise for the club to hire a man with 0 managerial experience for a squad containing talent such as Henrik Larsson and Mark Viduka, and volatile characters such as Eyal Berkovic. Barnes' coaching career actually didn't start too badly, with the boys more or less keeping pace with Rangers in the league, having finished 21 points behind them the previous season. But that October, disaster struck when Henrik Larsson suffered a double leg break in a UEFA Cup tie, and Barnes' decision to get in a 37-year-old Ian Wright as his replacement raised more than a few eyebrows. The former Arsenal man was older than Barnes himself. It didn't bode well, and by February, Celtic were 9 points adrift of the Gers, with Barnes facing an increasingly disgruntled dressing room. Then came the visit of second-tier Inverness Caledonian Thistle in the Scottish Cup. Celtic were 2-1 down by half-time, and during the break, an incensed Mark Viduka refused to come out for the second period, jumping in the bath instead and forcing Barnes to sub him. They lost the game 3-1, giving birth to the now legendary headline "Super Cali Go Ballistic, Celtic are atrocious," and earning Barnes the sack. Afterwards, he said, quote, "The players lost belief in me," just to state the obvious. 2. Stan Cullis. But perhaps the first ever victim of player power was Stan Cullis, who managed Wolverhampton Wanderers between 1948 and 1964. He remains the most successful manager in the club's history, having won the West Midlands' 3 top-flight titles and 2 FA Cups during his time at Molineux. They have never won the league since, and just to show how good Cullis was, between 1952 and 1961, they only dropped outside the top 3 once, propelled by the manager's uncompromising playing philosophy and disciplinarian approach. However, this approach didn't wash so well after 1961, when players in England finally won the battle to see the maximum wage cap abolished. Before, footballers couldn't earn more than £20 a week, but with this new law, they were able to demand higher pay and subsequently became more valuable assets to their club. And so when Cullis could only guide Wolves to 16th in 1964, it was the beginning of the end. He had already refused pay rises for a number of players, seeing the wage cap abolition as undermining his authority, and with the club at the bottom of the table in the early stages of the following season, many stars decided to hand in transfer requests. Faced with a max exodus, the powers that be had no choice but to sack the very man who had put Wolverhampton on the map. 1. José Mourinho. Yes, the 4th Chelsea manager on this list, but we aren't going to be talking about Mourinho's Stamford Bridge meltdown, as in many ways he'd already lost his power as a manager by the time he returned to West London in 2013. Mourinho had enjoyed huge success at Porto, Chelsea and Inter Milan by cultivating a siege mentality within their squads, who subsequently became disciples to him on the field. However, these methods only worked to a degree after he took the Real Madrid job in 2010. He may have wrestled the La Liga crown from Pep Guardiola emphatically in 2012, but his time at the Bernabeu came to be defined by his own paranoid leadership style, which saw him turn both the media and his own players against him. His public feud with club captain Casillas saw respect for him among the Real ranks evaporate, and by the time he left the club in 2013, had also fallen out with Sergio Ramos, Pepe and Cristiano Ronaldo. Making enemies of such big egos was never going to work out well, and he ended up the loser not only in the short term, but in the long run too. Mourinho's next 2 managerial positions, back at Chelsea and then Man United, would end in similarly foul fashion, with the likes of Eden Hazard, Diego Costa and Paul Pogba all winning power struggles with the Portuguese coach. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down there right now, and of course don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well for more great content. See you next time.